An anonymous genius, frustrated with the 2008 crash, creates an alternative to the system, a response to bank greed, a silent revolution born from chaos. Great story. The problem is that it ignores an inconvenient detail in line 1 of the code. Bitcoin uses SHA-256 as its core cryptographic hash function. SHA-256 was developed by the NSA, the United States National Security Agency, and published by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, in 2001, 7 years before Bitcoin. This is not secret, it is in public documents. NIST published the full specification, which became a global data security standard. But here is the uncomfortable question. Why would an algorithm created by the world's largest spy agency be the choice of someone trying to escape that very state's surveillance? The crypto community's usual answer is that SHA-256 is mathematically solid, open source, reviewed for decades by independent cryptographers. And that is true. As far as known mathematics goes, SHA-256 has no proven backdoor, no known vulnerability. But here comes the first layer most people do not process. The NSA was caught in an embarrassing situation years ago. They created another security protocol, paid $10 million to a company called RSA Security to adopt it as a global standard, and when Snowden leaked documents in 2013, it became clear that the protocol had a deliberately embedded backdoor. The NSA could break the encryption of any system using it. RSA said it did not know. The NSA did not comment. The protocol was removed from official recommendations. In other words, they have done this before, created something that looked secure, pushed it into the market, and used it as a surveillance tool. So when someone says, but SHA-256 is different, it is trustworthy, the legitimate question is, trustworthy based on what? The track record of who created it? And Satoshi? Disappeared in 2010, left the project, never came back. Identity still unknown. Candidates have been accused, investigated, exposed, and none confirmed. Craig Wright spent years in a legal crusade trying to prove he was Satoshi, lost in a British court in 2024, owes more than $300,000 in legal costs, and the only concrete result was convincing everyone he is not Satoshi. Anonymous identity, disappears at the peak, code uses an American intelligence standard, created at the exact moment the global financial system was most vulnerable and most hated.
Fine, let's assume SHA-256 is clean. Let's assume Satoshi was a brilliant libertarian with no agency ties. Bitcoin was born decentralized. That is historical fact. No government control, no bank, anyone with a computer could mine. Anyone could transact without asking permission. That was the idea. Then came 2024. Then 2025. Bitcoin ETFs approved in the United States. BlackRock, the largest asset manager on the planet, launches the iShares Bitcoin Trust and attracts billions within months. MicroStrategy accumulates hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins on its corporate balance sheet. El Salvador adopts it as legal tender under pressure, then partially retreats to close a deal with the IMF. Donald Trump signs an executive order creating a national strategic Bitcoin reserve. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent declares that Bitcoins confiscated by the federal government will be used to supply that reserve. Pause. Let that sink in. The same government that can pass laws, arrest people, confiscate property, and rewrite the rules in real time is now strategically accumulating the currency that was created to be immune to governments. Do you see the problem? Bitcoin has a maximum supply of 21 million units. That does not change. The blockchain does not lie. But who controls the circulating supply is another story. When BlackRock, MicroStrategy, the US government, and sovereign funds around the world start concentrating Bitcoin, they are not controlling the protocol. The protocol keeps running the same, but they control a massive portion of the available supply. And whoever controls supply in a market with relatively inelastic demand controls price, not through code, but through raw economic power. This is where the decentralized narrative starts to creak.
Bitcoin was designed to be decentralized in structure. Structure does not guarantee decentralization of ownership. Those are different things. You can have a fully open network and still have 90% of the assets concentrated in 1% of wallets. That is exactly what is happening. More than 70% of institutional Bitcoin custody is in the United States. The US government, just from seized Bitcoins in criminal operations, accumulated over 200,000 units before any formal political decision to create a strategic reserve. This is basic geopolitics. You do not need to control the code to control the asset. You control the asset by accumulating more of it than everyone else. But wait, there is more. There is a historical precedent here that is so obvious it hurts to ignore. Franklin Roosevelt signs Executive Order 6102. It becomes illegal for American citizens to own significant amounts of gold. Hand it over or go to jail. It was law. People complied. The government paid $21 per ounce. After collecting it, they devalued the currency and set the official price at $35 per ounce. Everyone who surrendered their gold lost around 40% of its value in months. It was legal confiscation. It worked because gold is physical, heavy, difficult to hide at scale, and the state had the power to search. The narrative at the time? National economic emergency. The country needed gold to stabilize the dollar during the crisis. Patriotism, collective necessity. It worked. Now replace gold with Bitcoin in your mind and think about what is different. Bitcoin has a problem gold never had. Every transaction is permanently recorded on a public ledger. It cannot be erased. It cannot be hidden. Every time you move Bitcoin, that move is recorded in a book anyone can consult forever. With gold, you bury it in the backyard and the government only finds it if they dig. With Bitcoin, you move it and the trail already exists, permanent, waiting for someone with enough resources to connect the dots. And connecting the dots has become cheap. The US government pays specialized firms to do exactly that, track who sent what to whom, even when people try to hide using anonymization tools. In 2020, the IRS paid $600,000 just to track Monero, considered the hardest to trace criminal cryptocurrency. If they're spending that on the difficult version, imagine what they can do with Bitcoin, where transactions are public by design. AI closes the loop. Algorithms identify behavioral patterns between apparently unrelated wallets, cross-reference with exchange data, social media, IP addresses, and build a dossier without hacking anything. So the question is not whether they can know what you did with your Bitcoin. They can. The question is, when they decide what you did is a problem, what happens next? Besant already answered partially. Seized Bitcoins go to the strategic reserve. If the reserve needs to grow, and seizure is one source, the incentive to expand the definition of suspect is real. It already happened with civil asset forfeiture in the United States, which allows the government to confiscate property without convicting the owner of any crime. You are not guilty, your property is. That legal distinction existed long before Bitcoin. I know what you're thinking. If I keep my Bitcoin in cold storage, no exchange, no third-party custody, they cannot reach it. You're right. Technically, they cannot. But they do not need to break encryption. They just need you to make useless while your Bitcoin remains locked in the wallet. They arrest you. They wait. They deny release until you cooperate. Or they create a law where any undeclared transaction is presumed criminal, and the burden of proof that you did nothing wrong falls on you, not them. If you think that is impossible or would never happen, it might be time to look more carefully at history. Each government looks at Bitcoin and sees something different. None of them see financial liberation. The United States plays both sides at once. It accumulates Bitcoin in a strategic reserve while developing a digital dollar. Why? Because a rising Bitcoin strengthens the narrative that a US digital dollar could be backed by something real. It is currency marketing. But too much freely circulating Bitcoin undermines the dollar's monopoly in international transactions, so they accumulate, regulate, and quietly hope nobody actually uses it too freely. China simply banned it. Not moral panic, calculation. They are building a digital yuan where every transaction can be monitored in real time by the party. Bitcoin was competition. Competition was removed. Europe did not ban it. It did something more efficient. It domesticated it. A rule set that forces any exchange to operate like a bank, with mandatory identification, automatic reporting to authorities, transaction limits. Bitcoin still exists in Europe, but anyone using it leaves a trace in the very system built to track it. Russia does not know what it wants. The central bank wants to ban it. The Kremlin wants to use it to bypass sanctions. Both sides argue publicly while Russian miners operate in the middle of the chaos using cheap energy. It is the most honest position of all, because at least the contradiction is visible. El Salvador is the experiment that ended badly. Bukele adopted Bitcoin as legal tender in 2021, became a crypto Twitter celebrity, and in 2025 partially stepped back to secure a $1.4 billion loan from the IMF. The IMF does not lend easily to a country using a currency it cannot monitor. When the bill comes due, whoever controls the old money sets the terms. And BlackRock. Larry Fink spent years calling Bitcoin a money laundering tool. The moment regulation allowed it, he became the largest Bitcoin ETF manager in the world. He did not change his beliefs. He saw margin and entered. That is what large institutions do. What all these cases have in common is that none treat Bitcoin as the original narrative promised. None see decentralization, freedom, and escape from the system. They see asset, threat, tool, opportunity. And the small investor who bought believing in a revolution is stuck in the middle, hoping the same players created by the system do not change the rules before he can exit. Physical cash is still the only medium of exchange where the transaction does not exist for third parties. The US government sends around $45 million per week to the Taliban in physical cash as declared humanitarian collapse prevention policy. It is done in cash because cash leaves no ledger, no blockchain, no public record. The transaction happens and disappears. That is exactly why physical cash survives. Not because it is convenient, not because it is modern, because it is the only medium where the state is not an involuntary observer. Bitcoin was created as an alternative to control. The irony is that because it is fully transparent by design, it may have become the most complete financial surveillance tool ever created. You do not need to break anyone's encryption. You just need enough computing power to correlate addresses with identities. And computing power is something the American state apparatus has in abundance. Bitcoin has value, that is not in question. It is scarce, easy to move, impossible to counterfeit, and no central bank can print more of it. As inflation protection, the argument is solid. The problem is not the asset, it is the environment around it. True financial freedom depends on being able to use your money without asking permission. That part is being dismantled piece by piece through regulation. Exchanges with mandatory KYC, automatic tax reporting, transactions above certain thresholds flagged. Bitcoin itself has not changed. The cage around it has. So the right question is not whether the price will go up. It is this: when you want to use what you bought, will you be able to? Under what conditions? With what restrictions? With what explanations properly documented for the government? History is full of examples of assets that belonged to the people until the day the state decided it needed them more. There was always a justification, always an emergency, always a law that made it legal. SHA 256 keeps running, the same algorithm created by the NSA, protecting every transaction of a network that was supposed to be the enemy of the state. Beautiful irony, or well-executed plan. It depends on how much you believe in coincidences. Tell me in the comments, do you still think Bitcoin is a tool for financial liberation, or has it become just another piece in the very game it claims to fight? If this video made sense to you, leave a like. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. If you want to understand how cryptocurrencies are an essential part of the United States' secret plan to magically erase its debt, I made a video exactly about that, and it is showing up for you right now.